getting diagnosed by Donahue, a diabetes debacle, and words powerful enough to end a career. Though her reputation rightfully took a hit based on her past behavior, Paula Deen has still dealt with her share of tragedy in life. Paula Deen married her first husband, James Jimmy Deen, in 1965 when she was just 18 years old. She soon became the mother of 2 sons, Jamie and Bobby. Her married life, however, was far from ideal due to her husband's alcohol consumption. As she wrote in her memoir, Paula Deen, "It ain't all about the cookin'. The drinking changed him. When he drank, he became dumb as a rock, and I couldn't depend on him." His drinking drove a wedge between them, and between the verbal put-downs he hurled at her, their rift grew increasingly larger as the years passed. After nearly 30 years of marriage, they separated in 1992 and subsequently divorced. There was, however, one final indignity she was forced to endure before ending the marriage, with Deen writing, "But even when I filed for divorce, he never left the house. I was the one who had to leave." Paula Deen was only 19 years old when she lost her father in a horrific car wreck. He previously had a risky surgery to fix a heart problem, but sadly developed a fatal blood clot that caused him to crash his car. As Deen recalled in her memoir, she was beyond crushed to lose her father, writing, "I simply tore apart. How would I ever live with this devastation? How would I ever fill the hole in my heart that Daddy's death dug?" Just 4 years later, Deen was forced to experience another family trauma when her mother was diagnosed with bone cancer, and she later passed at the age of 44. Interviewed by Fox News, Deen was convinced that it was the loss of her father that was really to blame for her mother's death, saying, "I say my mother died from heartbreak. She was a very quiet, reserved lady, and I said her pain had to come out somewhere because the cancer that she died from is not genetic." Losing both of her parents within a few years of each other left Paula Deen so emotionally ravaged that her mental health began to deteriorate. She was so distraught by her father's death that the only way she could fall asleep that night was if she lay in between her husband and her mother.
It started that day. I just didn't know it.
As Deen told Entertainment Tonight, she developed a crippling terror of death that manifested itself in fear of leaving her house, transforming her life into an anxiety-ridden prison-like existence, saying, "I was a basket case. I became so frightened of death. I would have panic attacks and my arms would go numb and you feel like you're having a heart attack." She also revealed that she kept a brown paper bag handy in case she needed to breathe into it to calm herself down. She didn't come to understand she was agoraphobic until the day she saw TV host Phil Donahue discussing the disorder in an episode of his talk show. She was then able to take the first steps toward conquering her fears and overcoming agoraphobia. While there's no debating that Paula Deen's Southern-inspired cuisine is mouthwateringly delicious, it's also loaded with unhealthy fat. In fact, HuffPost once added up all the butter used to make a Deen-style Thanksgiving dinner and revealed her meal required more than 9 sticks of the stuff. That's why there were mixed reactions amongst the public when she announced she was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Deen transformed that particular lemon into lemonade by becoming a spokesperson for Novo Nordisk, the manufacturer of a diabetes drug. When Deen confirmed she had been diagnosed a few years earlier, she was widely criticized for continuing to whip up her fatty fare on the Food Network, knowing the health risks involved. The most vocal of those critics was late celebrity chef Anthony Bourdain. As Bourdain told TV Guide, "I would think twice before telling an already obese nation that it's okay to eat food that is killing us." Deen explained why she hadn't gone public sooner than she did in an interview with USA Today, saying, "I made the choice at the time to keep it close to me, to keep it close to my chest. I felt like I had nothing to offer anybody other than the announcement. I wasn't armed with enough knowledge. I knew when it was time, it would be in God's time." Unfortunately for Paula Deen, more than a few of the negative situations in her life were brought on by her own behavior, with no one to blame but herself. By 2012, Paula Deen had parlayed her Food Network fame into an empire that raked in $17 million that year alone. That same year, she was hit with a lawsuit from Lisa Jackson, who worked at a restaurant co-owned by Deen and her brother, Bubba Hires. Jackson, the restaurant's former general manager, claimed she was subjected to continual sexism and racism, alleging Hires openly watched adult videos in the workplace and that both siblings repeatedly used the N-word. Deen fired back by alleging that Jackson had attempted to extort her for more than $1 million. Deen eventually reached a settlement with her former employee the following year, and the suit was dismissed. Weeks after the lawsuit was filed, however, all hell broke loose when the National Enquirer obtained Deen's deposition for the case. Asked to confirm Jackson's claim that she had used the N-word, Deen offered a startling confession by saying, quote, "Yes, of course." Asked if she had used the word since then, she said, "I'm sure I have, but it's been a very long time." Deen's use of the N-word wasn't the only example of jaw-dropping racism to emerge from the lawsuit and her deposition for it. As reported by Radar Online, Deen was hit with backlash over another section of the suit, with former employee Lisa Jackson recalling a time that Deen brainstormed ideas for a plantation-style reception she was throwing for the wedding of her brother, Bubba Hires. According to Jackson's account, Deen said, "Well, what I would really like is a bunch of little N-words to wear long-sleeve white shirts, black shorts, and black bow ties. You know, in the Shirley Temple days, they used to tap dance around. But we can't do that because the media would be on me about that." In her deposition, Deen disputed Jackson's recollection that she desired to celebrate her brother's nuptials by emulating a pre-Emancipation Proclamation Southern plantation. She did, however, admit to using the phrase "really Southern plantation wedding" when pitching her idea. Her intent, she explained, was to imitate a restaurant she had recently visited, where all the waitstaff were older black men attired in white evening jackets. As she said, quote, "That restaurant represented a certain era in America, one that she wanted to recreate." Paula Deen's admission instantly transformed her from beloved TV personality to toxic pariah. Shortly after the National Enquirer's report, the Food Network canceled her show and cut all ties with her. Deen's company issued a statement to TMZ reading, "Deen was born 60 years ago when America's South had schools that were segregated, different bathrooms, different restaurants, and Americans rode in different parts of the bus." The tone-deaf statement was ripped to shreds for attempting to excuse her behavior because she was a white person from the South of a certain age. Deen quickly booked an appearance on the Today Show to do some damage control, but backed out at the last minute. Instead, she issued a video on YouTube literally begging forgiveness.
My team, my fans, my partners, I beg for your forgiveness.
She posted another video blaming the media for characterizing her as a racist, declaring, "I want people to understand that my family and I are not the kind of people that the press is wanting to say we are." When her statement and 2 apology videos fell flat in the court of public opinion, Paula Deen re-examined the offer to appear on Today. That led her to sit down on live television with anchor Matt Lauer, who would eventually find himself neck-deep in an even bigger scandal than Deen's. Once again, Deen's attempt at redemption imploded when she attempted to paint herself as the victim.
There's been some very, very hurtful lies said about me.
She insisted the only time she had ever used the N-word was a time she had a gun held to her head as a bank teller, and bizarrely criticized young black people for their casual use of the word. Then she contradicted what she said in her sworn deposition when she claimed that the 1986 incident was the sole occasion, quote, "In all of my 66 years on Earth had I ever used it." Ultimately, Deen's interview did nothing to move the needle. Commenting on the sit-down, Today anchor Savannah Guthrie offered a pretty fair assessment when she stated, "People probably went in with an opinion and left the interview with the same opinion." Paula Deen's multiple attempts to mitigate the damage from her racism scandal had little impact. While the Food Network may have been the first corporate entity to sever ties with her, it was by no means the last. Within a matter of days, all the deals that Deen had spent a decade putting together vanished. Companies to distance themselves from Deen included Walmart, Smithfield Foods, Caesars Entertainment, and Target. Meanwhile, her lucrative partnership with the QVC home shopping channel also went bust. Even pharmaceutical firm Novo Nordisk fired her from her spokesperson gig, while Random House canceled an upcoming book it was slated to publish. As Forbes wealth reporter Caleb Melby told ABC News, the die had been cast when Food Network pulled the plug, explaining, "To see somebody who has been so closely aligned to her, they both grew famous and wealthy together, drop her has created a domino effect." Paula Deen was still reeling from her scandal when someone close to her emerged with further allegations. That someone was Dora Charles, who worked with Deen at her restaurants for 2 decades, regarded as Deen's secret weapon when it came to Southern cuisine. Charles had helped Deen open her flagship Savannah restaurant, Lady & Sons, and assisted in developing the eatery's recipes. Deen's battered reputation took further hits when Charles gave a scorched earth interview with the New York Times in 2013. Accusing Deen of using racist language, she revealed that Deen had once asked her to ring a bell outside the restaurant and yell for diners to, quote, "come and get it." Charles refused, recalling, "I said, I'm not ringing no bell. That's a symbol to me of what we used to do back in the day." As if it wasn't enough of a blow, Charles also recalled when Deen asked another black employee to dress up like Aunt Jemima for a pancake-making demonstration. Charles also recounted the promise Deen made to her early on in their working relationship.
"If I get rich, you get rich."
Deen did indeed get rich, very rich. Meanwhile, Charles still earned $6.50 an hour. Deen responded with a statement characterizing Charles as greedy, stating, "Fundamentally, Dora's complaint is not about race, but about money." Paula Deen's brother, Bubba Hires, had been involved in many of the allegations brought forth in the lawsuit that destroyed her career and her reputation. Hires had begun working with his sister in 2000 and was an integral part of developing and building her successful restaurant endeavors. Hires wrote in the introduction to his cookbook, Uncle Bubba's Savannah Seafood, "Without Paula's support, sensible advice, and unconditional love, I'd probably be a lost soul." In 2019, Hires died from pancreatic cancer at the age of 65. In 2014, his namesake restaurant, Uncle Bubba's Oyster House, was forced to shut its doors after Paula's scandal. In a statement to USA Today about her brother, Deen wrote, "Bubba was the greatest brother who was loved by so many people. We will miss him dearly."